Well, not good afternoon, but good morning, Lydia. How's it going?
Hi, Sarah. I'm good. How are you today?
Doing great. So
Well,
glad that we're here. We've got a big day to talk about.
oh my gosh, we got so much good stuff, so much good information to educate people. So why don't you start first, Sarah?
Awesome. So I'm just going to dive right in. We cover the numbers, and our forbearance numbers have been pretty consistent over the past few months. There's been, there's a lot of movement coming in, coming out, people exiting plans, starting new plans, but it's really kind of being consistent. Around 2.7 million borrowers are in active forbearance plans. And, week over week, we did have a slight increase from 5.37 to 5.38% of all loans that are in forbearance. And, it's not a huge number, but it's a very real number. And so we are paying a lot of attention to it. And then we're also looking at what does that mean by stage? How are the borrowers that are in forbearance? Where are they, where are they in their progression through it? And because forbearance plans are in, 3 or 6 month sets, and then it can be extended up to a total of 12 months. So initial stage did increase slightly. It's a little over 18%. Extensions decreased, and that's always been our biggest. We're just under 80% for that. And our re-entries did increase a little bit. It's about 2.5% of everybody in forbearance. So it's, we're watching, it's really that extension number, which is pretty consistent with the way, when we look at like the delinquencies and things like that, it is consistent. So some of the things that when we look at the people who have exited forbearance from June 1st through January 17th, 44.4% of the borrowers exiting their plan are current. So we've got, great, they figured stuff out, they've moved on. But really the number that we want to pay attention to is that 13.4% of borrowers that are leaving forbearance with they're still late and they have no loss mitigation plans. This is the group of people that really needs guidance to know that they have options. And then if you think about it this way, so pretend all 2.7 million of those borrowers that exited forbearance today, that 13.4% is around 362,000 borrowers. So that's kind of like our number that's, and this is all nationwide. These are the borrowers that need to know what their options are. And then,
absolutely.
And I mentioned a little, delinquency. And here's the thing is not everybody who is in forbearance or not everybody who is delinquent is in forbearance. And so there's some different things with that. There are about 3.55 million borrowers are in delinquency that are delinquent. And that number has been going down. What we're really looking at is what the difference is from where we were at the beginning of 2020. It's about 1.8 million more seriously delinquent than there were before. So I don't want to diminish it in any way. There is that's a group that is going to need to know, options. Not necessarily all of those people are in forbearance, but again, we're looking at, it's upwards of close to 2 million people that are going to need to know that there's things that can be done.
Help out there.
Exactly. And it makes it kind of tough, as we know. So like with the foreclosure, eviction, and forbearance moratorium, or not forbearance, not a moratorium, but the others is a moratorium. It's been pushed out. So we don't know the exact, what's going to happen. We do know that right now, when the moratoriums are actually going to expire, right now they're set for March 31st. When that happens, we're going to actually see, we'll probably expect some bit of, not like a flood, but we'll see a big number coming into foreclosure because we've had that 13 months of pause. Now it could go, later than that, but we'll see something happen. And, one of the things that we recently learned that's really interesting is when that happens, because of COVID, the way that foreclosure notices have been posted has changed. And a lot of these notices are now being posted on auction.com. They're not necessarily being posted on the borrower's garage in the different ways. So maybe some of these borrowers won't even know, which is going to be.
I think a lot don't know.
And so because we're looking at that March date right now, we know servicers and lenders are starting to prep, getting ready for what's going to happen next. And I know, Lydia, what are you hearing? What are they telling you?
So I had a nice conversation with one of my asset managers yesterday, and it's coming, and they are preparing. They are hiring they have told me that it's coming and it's going to come big. Not as big as we did 10 years ago, like you said with the numbers. However, it is coming and people need to be prepared. Some people have no clue that they're going to be going into foreclosure. I mean, like you said, it used to be attached to the garage or to the front door. And now all of a sudden it's online. And unless you know to look online for your address, you won't know it. So that's a concern I do have. But
Big concern.
exactly. So back in the summertime, I started getting these inspections, and now all of a sudden, in the last few weeks, I've been getting more and more BPOs, which are basically a detailed comparison of houses. And if we were to put this house on the market today, what would you list it for? And those are starting to come in more and more. So, which tells me that they are starting to, those that are coming in are probably people in for forbearances. So when I spoke with my asset manager yesterday, I was told that they got a huge lot, about 30,000. Now that's across the country, but
It's a big number.
30,000, big number, from one of their customers. And they were all from people that were in forbearance. So that tells you right there that there are some people who got into these forbearances and they're having some trouble, and they don't know, either like you said, they don't either have an exit strategy to pay back what they have. So I have a quick story to tell you. A friend of mine who I helped buy a house like a year and a half ago, she was thinking about a week ago of refinancing her house. So she called her servicing company, and they said, yes, we can do a refi, but you can't do a refi until May, because she had just done one back a few months ago, and
Like
she's got this,
October, yeah.
yeah, streamlined. She's got a streamlined type of refi, so she can't do another refi until May. So this week she found out that she might be losing her job potentially. So she called back the servicer and said, hey, I understand that there's some forbearance things. Can you tell me about it? The company basically said, yes, you qualify for a forbearance, and yes, you can do it. So she calls me up after she's talked to them, and she says, Lydia, here's what I think I'm going to do. I'm going to do my forbearance for February, March, and April, and then I'm going to do my refi in May. And I said, no, you cannot do that. I said, you have to do a refi, you have to have 3 consecutive payments, and you have to be out of forbearance, and you have to be caught up. So people don't, people just assume. And I made her call the bank back and say, okay, if I do this forbearance, can I do this refi? Because I wanted her to get the real scoop from them. But
Yes.
when you're talking to 2 different people and you're not giving them the whole story, you have no clue. My mother's neighbor, who did a forbearance and towards the end of last year, he did a 12-month forbearance, and he thinks he's going to refinance after he's done too. And he has no clue, even though I've explained this to him. So I think the perception out there is people get this information, but they don't really understand. And we in the industry, lenders, title, real estate agents, need to educate our clients on what you can and can't do before you get into something like this. It's crazy.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
and the challenge too, because they're even within the departments, within some of the banks, they're not communicating with each other.
Yes.
So she can call and ask about a refi here, and then over here talk about forbearance, and they're not necessarily talking to each other.
Right.
So they're not giving her all the information.
Exactly.
That
Exactly. And that's where I think a lot of people are getting into trouble, because I mean, she's doing her homework up front, saying, okay, what are my options if this happens? So I commend her for that, but she's not getting the full scoop, like you said. And so she's just assuming, oh, I can do this and then I can do that. But that does not, people don't realize that you cannot be in a forbearance and do a refi. So you have other options. You can get a renter for a short term. You can, you could put your house on the market and make money, because she bought a year and a half ago. She's got equity in her home. So, I mean, there's all kinds of different ways of doing it without doing a forbearance and getting yourself caught up in that situation. Now, if you need a forbearance, it's there for those people, but you just have to know, going into a forbearance, what are some of the problems that you have? And, or what are some of the concerns that could happen later on? I mean, you have to have the right information, you have to have the full story, I think, right up front. So we also have discovered there's some tricky ways of some of these investors that are doing foreclosures. So tell us about some of those too, Sarah.
And just as you're describing this, I'm like, the devil's in the details, right?
Yeah,
Always,
it is.
and that kind of feeds into what you were just talking about with some of the little scary kind of foreclosures that we recently found out about that are happening right now because they don't have the same kind of protections with the foreclosure moratorium. And so this is what we commented on it last week, but so 10 years ago, we're in the midst of our housing crash. Homeowners were negotiating loan modifications, filed Chapter 7 bankruptcy that allowed them to stay in their house. I mean, there's a lot of things that people did. They completed it, moved on, didn't close that chapter in their life and moved on. They don't want to look at it again, right? And then a lot of what the Chapter 7 BKs did, or bankruptcies did, is they kind of said, okay, well, those second liens, remember the 80-20s where everybody was getting 80%, first loan, 20% on the second. A lot of them were home equity lines of credit. And these seconds became kind of these weird toxic loans. And a lot of times with the loan mods or the BK, they went away, right? Like the monetary value went away. But what we know is 60% of the foreclosures out there right now are these notes that are being purchased from the banks. And it's like, well, what? How can you do that? Just because the monetary value went away does not mean the lien actually went away. And so the liens still exist. And what some of these kind of third-party investors are doing is they're coming and buying these notes for pennies on the dollar and moving forward with foreclosing on the seconds. Now,
so these are actually second and third loans.
Correct.
They're not the first loan. Like people think, like people always assume the first loan is the one that's foreclosing. These are second and third loans. So
yes, good point, because that's a key factor in this. And so, the borrowers thought they were charged off, they were gone. And then all of a sudden somebody's kind of filing foreclosure on it and saying, oh, you're going to pay me this, or, even just charging them interest on, back payment for 10 years. And they're
holding them hostage.
Them hostage. Exactly. And it's, they're doing their homework, and there's a lot of other nuances and details within it. But if there's certain times when you're like, well, I had one of those, or, there's you got to check on to see who's owning them. And if anybody's trying to file paperwork, there are options with this too. But it's something to be mindful if you or anybody has seconds that were negotiated off, but they are still recorded against the property. That's something to be mindful of.
It's huge. You've got to really think about it. And what would be good for people to know too is someone like you who works in the title industry. They can call you and you can do basically a title search for them to see if they're still there, right?
Yes, I can check to see what's going on, lien position, how many, what the amounts are, all that stuff. So can look into that.
So really, I mean, ideally, people just have to be very mindful about the last thing we want is for them to foreclose on a property where they right now have equity. Everybody's got equity, some kind of equity. So we don't want them to panic sell, and we don't want them to get caught up with these third-party investors that are purchasing and holding their loans hostage. I mean, there's options for you. So let's regroup and let's figure out what we can do so that you're not giving your equity to a third-party person or to a large iBuyer. There's equity in your home. There's enough people that will buy your home. You don't even have to. We could do it with an investor, and we could get a group of investors fighting over your house, not just one investor.
Absolutely.
So there's lots of equity in people's homes. I want to reiterate, don't panic sell, because that's the worst thing that can happen. But call us for options. And definitely, if you did one of those second or third loans to buy your home 10 years ago or 12 years ago, 15 years ago, contact Sarah to find out, do I still have it? Is it still a lien on my property somehow, some way? And let's figure out how to take that off.
Definitely. Absolutely. Yeah, I think that sounds great. I mean, we've
Yep.
got a lot of stuff going on, and we're just going to keep sharing this information, and we hope you enjoy it. And thanks so much, Lydia, for your time and your expertise. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Sarah. We'll see you next week.
Sounds good. See you later.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.